A reading from Acts. When the day of Pentecost had come, the disciples were all together in one place, and suddenly from heaven there came a sound like a rush of violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit had given them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound, the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all these who are speaking Galileans? And how is it that we hear, each of us, in our own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes. Christians and Arabs, in our own language, we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power." All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." But Peter, standing with the 11, raised his voice and addressed them. "Men of Judea and all who live in Jerusalem, let it be known to you and listen to what I say. Indeed, these are not drunk as you suppose, for it is only 9 o'clock in the morning. No, this is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, in those days I will pour out my Spirit, and they shall prophesy. And I will show portents in the heavens above, and signs on the earth below, blood and fire and smoky mist. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the coming of the Lord's great and glorious day, that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved." The word of the Lord.
Trinity Sunday, here we go, folks. In your seatbelts. John Decker always says to me, "I want to see what you're going to do with Trinity Sunday this year. You know, are you going to skirt around it or are you going to dive into it?" Well, I think this morning I'm going to dive into it. So fasten your seatbelt, Dr. Decker, and here we go. We're taping this early in the morning, and I need caffeine. And so I have caffeine here in the form of coffee. This is what I need right now. It's nice and it's warm and it gets me started in the day. Later on, I'm going to need caffeine. And so in the afternoons, I don't like to drink coffee because it's too hot. So I'll probably go into my refrigerator and have Coca-Cola. And then later on in the evening, when things are calming down, I may need a little bit more caffeine, and so I might make myself a cup of tea. It depends on what I need in that moment. And there we go. We have the trinity of caffeine: coffee, Coke, and tea. If I wanted to make it all C's, I could say coffee, Coke, and chamomile, except wait a minute, chamomile doesn't have caffeine, so we'll have to nix that. But anyhow, the human mind is very limited when you look at the human mind in terms of the entire universe, the entire cosmos. We are one small compartment of all of that, and we can only understand things in certain ways. And so we have this concept of God that is just like, too daunting. And so sometimes we need to break it down for ourselves, because we need to relate to God in different ways. You know, if I'm relating to God by looking at the mountains and looking at the clouds and the vastness of the ocean, the power of the wind, I'm going to think of God the Father, the big creator who made things. But if I'm taking my emotions to God, my sadness, my anger, my happiness, my joy, it's helpful to relate to God as a human being. And so we have Jesus, somebody that I can talk to, somebody who I can call my companion on the way, my friend. And then at other times, things are a little more esoteric, like, oh, where did that kind thought come from? Where did that warm feeling come from? And it's like, well, it's not, Jesus didn't make that, and the idea of the vast God is a little too daunting to think of that, and so we have God, the Holy Spirit, that we can latch on to in those times. The gospel today says, go forth and baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, which I like because it means to me, don't limit God to one small entity that is understandable only to us in a certain time and in a certain way. God is so much more vast and expansive than that. So instead of going out and baptizing in the name of the Father only, in the name of the Son only, in the name of the Holy Spirit only, be extravagant and go out and bless them and baptize them in all three, and be generous and abundant and operate from that kind of stance. And boy, if we could do that, just think what the world would be like, an abundant world, full of generosity and goodness. I think it would make for a wonderful offering to Holy Spirit, and it would be a wonderful offering to the world, to operate out of abundance and generosity. Think of what that world would look like. I think it would be a world of kindness and compassion and love and ultimately peace, and there would be no wars or rumors of war. And so in the meantime, we've got a lot of work to do, and we are now called to embody the presence of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit through our thought, words, and deeds. And I hope that this service this morning and this worship will help empower you to that wonderful, generous, and abundant end.